In 593, we have the empress at that time. Her brother had been the emperor, and he had passed away. So she came to the throne, and she was ill. She was very sickly. Her name was Empress Suiko. So because she was not able to rule, she asked her nephew, the previous emperor's son, Prince Shotoku, to become a regent. And a regent essentially means that when a monarch is not able to rule due to mental or physical incapacitation, he or she will ask a member of the family, either a sibling or a niece, nephew or niece, or a brother sibling, to help them with government administration. So that was regent, the regent's, Prince Shotoku, the prince regent's role in this system. So he was the son of a previous emperor. His father was the emperor, Suiko's brother, who had passed away. But Shotoku's mother was actually a member of the Soga clan. So keep in mind that the Soga clan was very, very pro-Buddhist, and as such, Prince Shotoku was himself an extremely devout Buddhist, and he really strengthened the power of Buddhism in Japan. That was his goal, and by strengthening power of Buddhism in Japan, he also wanted to really deepen the relations with China. Okay? Keep in mind that by 600, China was a very, very advanced political state. It was a world power. China had an empire, and Japan was just starting out. They don't have a government. They don't have a writing system. They don't really have anything. So Japan needs to really learn from its big brother, China. So Prince Shotoku says the best way to learn is to send people to China, to travel there, to live there, and to learn things and come back and teach us. So starting in 600, he initiates something called the mission system. And so Japan every year begins sending people to China in order to have them study there and learn things so that they can come back and help Japan modernize its culture, its political system, and its way of life. So Prince Shotoku sent everybody. You could be a commoner, you could be a Buddhist monk, you could be a scholar, an envoy, imperial princes. He would send his siblings and cousins there. And they would go to China. They would stay there for a number of years. And I say years because remember, this isn't like when you could take an airplane. You could take an airplane and go. You actually would have to go take a ship there, and it would take a very, very long time. And it was a dangerous journey. There was piracy, there were natural disasters, starvation, anything could happen, illness. But it was very important for the future of the Japanese state that these young scholars would go to China, study there, and then return back to Japan to share what they learned with the people who lived there. So as a result of these missions, two major cultural developments came from China to Japan during the Asuka period. Two of them go hand in hand. The first one was the adoption of a writing system from China, and the second was Confucianism. So writing system, if you have taken Japanese class, you have learned kanji, or Chinese characters. This is when kanji was introduced to Japan, during the Asuka period. Before that, Japan didn't have a writing system. Everything we've learned about for the Jomon, the Yayoi, the Tomb period, all of this is basically from archaeological evidence and the Chinese records, because the Chinese did have a writing system. That's why they wrote about Japan. The Japanese didn't have a writing system. And so Japanese was written using Chinese characters now, thanks to the scholars who went to China, and they brought Chinese characters back to Japan. Japan was now able to adopt a writing system. And without a writing system, you can't have a government, because you need to have taxation, you need to keep records, you need to have a magistrate who's going to keep the peace and make sure everything's okay. How can you do any of these things without a writing system? Now that Japan has a writing system, thanks to China, thanks to Chinese characters, now you can start to really develop your political system and your bureaucracy, thanks to writing. And Confucianism also comes into Japan at this time. Confucianism was never a religion in Japan like Shinto or Buddhism. It was purely a philosophy that was adopted by the government. It was actually developed in China by Confucius about 1,000 years before it ever entered Japan in the Asuka period. So it's been around for a long time. But Confucianism's role in Japan was a philosophy to help guide the concept of good government. It preaches what the government needs to do to look after its people. And it also tells the people that their number one role in life is to loyally devote themselves to the government, to their superiors. This could be either inside the home, respecting one's parents, respecting one's elders. It could be in the community, respecting the elderly in the community. It was also definitely used to make sure that people respected the government. In Japan's case, the emperor. The emperor is divine, and he controls everything. He's a divine god, and you must serve him with your entire being. And this is what Confucianism taught. Of course, the government's job was to be ethical and to practice moral and good government. So it was a, deal that the government had their role and the people had their role. So this was very, very useful in China to create a harmonious country, and so the Japanese adopted it as well as a philosophy. So now in the Asuka period, Japan has a writing system and it has a set of ethics, Confucianism, thanks to China. So now you start to see the Japanese nation state start to develop. We're not looking at individual villages or farming communities anymore like with the Yayoi period and the Tun period. Now we're looking at a country start to be born thanks to Prince Shotoku's missions to China. So because you have a nation state, your nation state needs a set of laws. So you have a writing system, and you want to start using that writing system to develop a set of laws. So in the year 604, Prince Shotoku is responsible for writing the first Japanese constitution, 17-article constitution. This constitution contains influences, of course, from Confucianism, because you have a lot of references to harmony, loyalty, good government. It solidifies the position of the emperor. It says the emperor is basically the lord of the land. He is a descendant of the sun goddess, and he has a mandate to rule. Essentially, this mandate is given to him by heaven, by the sun goddess, because the emperor is her descendant, and this cannot be taken away, because the imperial family is divine. So this was basically spelled out in the constitution, but there's a lot of references to Buddhism as well, of course, and also to Shintoism. In fact, discussing the sun goddess by it all is a reference to Shintoism. So you can see that even though we're looking at Chinese influence, at Buddhism, at Confucianism, Shinto is still a main part of the Japanese political system, really. After the constitution is written, Prince Shotoku writes a letter to the Emperor of China. This is the year 607, so he's basically solidifying his role as the leader of Japan. And he actually calls when he writes the letter to China, he says, from the leader, or from the ruler of the land of the rising sun to the ruler of the land of the setting sun, because remember, the sun sets in the direction of China. So it was not a dig. I think he was making a poetic reference from the land where the sun rises to where the sun sets. But the Chinese emperor was very upset, because implying that China is the land of the setting sun was kind of a dig in his mind, because you're implying that our time is over and your time is starting. So the Chinese emperor never responded to Shotoku's letter. But the good news is, thanks to this letter, Japan got its name. If you look at the Chinese characters, the kanji for Japan, you have the kanji for sun, and also the kanji for origin, right? So the origin of the sun, the place where the sun rises. And that's how Nihon, or Nippon in Japanese, got its name. So Shotoku can be credited with that as well. That same year, Prince Shotoku builds a temple, a Buddhist temple, outside the city of Nara, Horyuji Temple. It is still around today. Actually, it is the oldest surviving Buddhist temple in Japan, and the oldest wooden building in the entire world. The oldest wooden building that still stands. So you can still go visit it today and think of Prince Shotoku, because he's the one who built it. And if you look at the picture, most Buddhist temples in Japan have this style, where you have a main worship hall and then you have a pagoda right next to it. All good things come to an end. Prince Shotoku dies in 622, and to commemorate his death, you see a bronze set of statues were built in Horyuji Temple, where he is enshrined, and you see the Buddha in the middle, surrounded by two lesser deities. This style is very, very characteristic of Asuka period Buddhist sculpture and art. They're all in bronze usually, and they usually have the Buddha in the middle, surrounded by deities, to his right or to his left. So this was to commemorate Prince Shotoku's death. The previous slide, you see so many accomplishments that were done by one person in 20 years. And Is it really true? Could he have done this all by himself? And we really have to sit back and wonder if he really existed. And these historians state that it was basically done for propaganda purpose. That he, it's a convenient figure to have one person credited with all of these to teach kids in school or future generations that okay, this is someone we should aspire to be. Look what he did, and that these various things, the missions and setting up Horyuji Temple and setting up the letter to the Chinese emperor that were done by a group of people, a group of ministers, for example, as opposed to one person. And keep in mind, Shotoku is from the imperial family. So it's convenient to have someone like that credited with all of these tasks. But it's a theory. I personally don't believe it, but it's interesting to think about the fact that he might be a created figure. Why do politicians and why do governments feel the need to make up or create figures and credit them with these historical tasks?